Hello and welcome to My PGCE, a podcast documenting my journey as a trainee teacher, with a special focus on mental health. I am your host, James B. Well, I'm really happy that we could meet and have a chat about our PGCEs.
Yeah, I mean, mine was a year ago, so I have to think back a little bit.
Of course. Okay, yeah, because I wondered that actually, because I was having a look at your podcast, and am I right to say that you do an episode every term, or is it every half term?
Yeah, so I did it quite regularly during my actual PGCE.
Yeah.
Because I was also using it for my assessment.
Oh, great.
It was easier than writing stuff down because I learn very kinesthetically.
Okay.
Even though that's apparently not a thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I heard about that. Was one of those myths. We had like a myth busting session fairly early on in my PGCE, and that did come up, although it didn't really get busted that much because I believe that you can still have learning preferences, but some materials just lend themselves more readily to certain styles. So like, if you're learning about maps, then obviously you need the visual stuff, but you could still have your own preferences. I mean, if you wanted to listen to the layout of a map, I'm sure that'd be better. But yeah, so I don't think that myth for me wasn't actually convincingly busted. So
no, and I'm like sat there thinking, but I can't learn by reading. It doesn't go into my head. But I'm not. That's because I'm dyspraxic, or that's because I'm kinesthetic. We'll see. So I did that then, but I was getting messages from people saying, actually, no, we want to hear about your ECT year as well.
Yeah.
So I started doing a podcast every term to kind of track my PGCE. But I'm now looking at an internal promotion in terms of like doing stuff around TLA.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I've got my interview in a few weeks, so we'll see. So I wanted to do something over summer, talking about things like pedagogy and really focusing in on different areas of teaching. But I was going to use this episode as like the final episode of the series just before going back in September.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I think I made you something similar with mine. And so, okay, so yeah, you decided to do your PGCE kind of to help you meet some of the assessment requirements you decided to do your podcast to help you meet some of the assessment requirements for the PGCE. And I think my decision was similar. I had done a podcast before, and I found it a really helpful tool for reflection. Like I think I reflect much deeper when I have to think about creating a podcast episode, and much of the PGCE involves reflection. So I found it really helpful in that regard to sit down on a Saturday morning and think about what's gone on that week or over the past 2 weeks, say. Really helped me tick that box, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And why, if you don't mind me asking, what led you to teaching at all? What made you decide to go for teaching in the first place?
What I might do before I answer that question, because I've actually not started recording yet.
Oh, haven't you? Oh, okay, cool.
So I'll answer that question definitely, but what I might do first is ask you to introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, we didn't do intros. That'd be wonderful.
So, I'll just do it in 3, 2, 1. So would you like to introduce yourself and tell the listeners who you are?
Yeah, of course. So I'm just coming to the end of my PGCE. My subject is maths, and yeah, I do a podcast. We just spoke about it briefly a moment ago. I've done a podcast this year documenting my journey on the PGCE with a special focus on my mental health as I went along. And I did that because I thought it would help me reflect, which would help me with the PGCE assessment. So much of it is based on reflection. I thought a podcast would be a good way to facilitate that. And shall I say how I was drawn to teaching in the first place? Would that be a good idea?
That'd be good.
So I worked in higher education in universities. I taught some philosophy at Warwick University whilst I was doing a PhD there. And I really enjoyed the teaching side of things. And my funding ran out, unfortunately. So I could no longer really continue with the academic, with kind of the professional academic philosophy side of things.
Yeah.
But my undergraduate degree was in maths and philosophy, and I've had a love for maths for a long time. And so I thought that I would get into being a secondary school maths teacher instead. I kind of floated around a little bit before I made that decision. And kind of during that floaty around period, I really felt like I lacked a sense of purpose. And I don't know why I didn't make the decision sooner, really, because my sense of purpose this year, whilst training to become a teacher, has never been stronger. And I've felt really good for that reason. So, yeah, it was a combination of my love for maths, wanting to have a really strong sense of purpose, and having really enjoyed teaching at a university level that led me to do the PGCE in secondary maths education. Yeah, so that's me. And would you like to introduce yourself? I mean, I'm sure your listeners already know you very well, but it'd be nice if you could say a little bit about yourself for my listeners.
Yeah, just for context, we both have a podcast, and we're both recording for the podcast at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And this episode will be on both podcasts. So if you listen to both, maybe give both a listen. Like, listen to it twice.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Home. So I'm Hattie. I'm just coming to the end of my first year in teaching, and I teach business studies and drama. So I finished my PGCE last year, and quite similar, really. I started my podcast as a reflection tool, because this is how I learn. I learn by talking about my experiences and reflecting on things. So when we actually had to go back and reflect, it was much easier for me to talk about it rather than to write it down. So that's why I started this podcast, and now it's just kind of taken on a bit of a life of its own.
Yeah.
So there we go.
And what drew you to teaching in the first place? Was it kind of something you always wanted to do?
Absolutely. Like, you know, when you're little and like you play games, so like my brother used to play like soldier games and stuff like that because he really wants to be in the army. I used to play teaching games in classroom and like teach my nana things at the back of the kitchen. But it's what I've always wanted to do, and I've always wanted to teach secondary. It's never been I want to teach primary. I've always wanted to teach secondary.
Yeah.
So took my A-levels with the view of very much being a drama teacher.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed throughout my second year, really. So throughout my upper sixth, because I'd applied for loads of drama courses at uni. I'd even applied to drama school. I'd got in. It was really, really exciting. And then something happened, which I'm not really going to say on the podcast because it does involve somebody else, that really made me lose my confidence in the aspect of drama. Somebody who I respected told me something about they're just kind of trying to bring me down, really. Right. And I'd lost my confidence for it. So I changed my degrees. So I contacted all the universities I'd applied to, obviously the drama schools I had to drop out of. But my firm and my insurance choice, luckily, were the University of York and the University of Salford. So I could swap my degrees over. So contacted them, said, listen, I want to change my degree. The other subject that I did at A-level that I could have taken at university was business. I also did a psychology A-level, but hated that.
Okay, fair enough.
But I loved business. I had the most amazing business teacher in my second year who, really excitingly, is actually going to be my line manager and my head of department next year.
Oh, nice.
So swapped my degrees over and then became a business teacher. But luckily this year, in my school, the opportunity came up to also teach Year 7 drama. So I've taken that and I'm getting back into it because I have done performances. I have carried on acting. So I still do have that experience that I can teach drama as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's a complicated story.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we all, I think loads of people I've spoken to have a fairly complicated story as to how they got into teaching. There don't seem to be many straight paths. So I before we met to have a conversation today, I had to listen to your latest episode.
Oh, okay.
And
what about the football?
Yes, yeah. Pep or Gaff, was it? Yeah. Pep or Gaffy, yeah. That was nice.
Rates are funny, let's just say that.
Yeah, yeah. They have been in my experience as well. But something you said there that I really liked was, and I just wanted to kind of ask you a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
You said that it's really important to pick your battles.
Oh,
100%. And in my experience so far on the PGCE, that has been crucial as well, because you are just overloaded all the time with the amount of things you have to do. And if you try to do them all, you'll burn out. So you have to have some way of deciding which things you're going to prioritize and which things you can put off until a little bit later.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found most challenging when I started my PGCE was I didn't know how to make that decision. Because I had so little experience in secondary education, I didn't really know how to decide what to prioritize. It was just all like constant noise, and I couldn't filter out the important things. So I wanted to ask you, when you're picking your battles, do you have any kind of like guiding principles that help you think, okay, that's the battle I'm going to pick right now? Like, how do you decide what to prioritize?
So I tried to think about the consequences of what's going to happen here. So, for example, I had a situation the other day where I had a really, really generally fantastic student, who'd done something that normally I would give it attention for 100%. However, I was thinking, Joe, what? This is going to cause more trouble than it's worth, because they're going to get upset. Parents are going to get upset. Form tutors are going to get upset. And I just thought, this is not worth the consequences of it. So I'm going to have a restorative conversation with this kid instead and say, okay, why have you done that? Okay, let's move on. Let's not do this again, because it would have caused so much upset. And normally I'm not really one for saying, well, they're normally great, so I'm not going to give them a detention, or I'm not going to follow up that with a consequence. However, in this case, it really was not worth it. So I tried to think of the consequences of things. And it's like prioritizing tasks as well.
Yeah.
Like at the moment, I've got shed loads of marking to do, all the year 10 mocks we've just done. But I've also got a CPD session that I'm running for the whole school on Wednesday. Wow. And I've also got an assembly to plan. And I'm just trying to think, Joe, what? This marking doesn't need to be done till next Friday. I'm going to do the stuff I need to do that's on a deadline now. And Joe, what? Next week, I absolutely will regret not doing my marking this week. However, the consequences of not getting my marking done right now is nowhere near the same consequences of not getting the CPD session planned for Wednesday and my year 7 assembly done for Thursday.
Yeah.
Especially when year 10 aren't even in this week and they're on work experience. So it's really thinking about the consequences of not doing something.
Yeah. And I like that example with the student. So you were able to make that decision because you know that student really well, and you could accurately predict the consequences of different courses of action. And I think one of the things I struggled with at the beginning of the PGCE, and I'm sure this is probably the same for anyone going into any new school, you don't know the students. So one of my pieces of advice, I think, for people coming into the PGCE is to kind of give yourself that time to get to know your environment, get to know your students, because it's only with that knowledge that you can start making sensible decisions about what to prioritize and which battles to pick.
Exactly. And the thing is, I think the relationships that you build with your students is the most important thing over anything else. Because yes, obviously what we teach is important. Their academic outcomes are important. We need to do things like adding value and making sure we're including, intent, implementation, impact, and stuff like that. But in reality, I can't tell you a single maths lesson I had at school. I don't know what happened in my maths lessons. But what I do remember is that my maths teacher, every time I was panicking or I was stressed about my maths GCSEs, or I was going through a hard time at home or anything like that, my maths teacher was there for me. And I knew that I could go to her and I could say, Joe, what? I'm having a bit of a hard time right now, or I'm really stressed, I'm really panicking. I don't think I'm going to get the grade that I need to get into my A level. And that's what I remember about my maths teacher. It's the same with like my drama teacher, who ended up being my godmother, because I asked her to be my confirmation sponsor.
Lovely.
I know. And she was also my form tutor. I can't tell you a single drama lesson I had. I know full well that without my drama teacher, I wouldn't be the person that I am today.
Yeah.
And at points, I don't think she knows it, but she could have easily been the reason I'm still here today.
Yeah, I think those relationships are absolutely crucial. Like you say, I've had a fantastic mentor in my second placement at my PGCE, just one of the most amazing teachers I've seen. And he said that the two most important things, in his opinion, when it comes to teaching are good explanations, but more importantly, the kids need to know that you care about them.
Yeah.
He said that if you can nail those two things, then you'll fly as a teacher. And again, building those relationships and getting the kids to a place where they know you care about them is, again, something that just takes time. You have to just put in the hours. I think that was something that because I'm a real control freak. And
teachers are, don't worry. Yeah. All control freaks and perfectionists.
Yeah, exactly. And when I got thrown into my first placement school, it was just pure chaos. Like, I don't know whether you've seen that little model to do with learning. It crops up all the time throughout my PGCE, where you've got like your comfort zone is the inner circle, the next one out is your growth zone, and then the one beyond that is chaos, or just like. And I felt that I was so far beyond my growth zone. I was just in the red, in pure chaos. I didn't know which way was up, and with hindsight, I should have just relaxed into it more. Like I was fighting the tide, and I should have just let the tide whisk me wherever it wanted to take me. So yeah, I caused myself undue stress right at the beginning of the year. I should have just chilled out a little bit more and just appreciated that it takes time to get the important things right. Yeah, and then things become easier thereafter.
They really do. I was having this conversation with my mentor from my PhD the other day, because I went back to my old college and did a careers day.
Oh, cool.
The link teacher, which was really cute.
Yeah.
Really nice, especially because I'm going back to that school next year. And I was just saying, there's a lesson I taught at the very, very beginning of my PGCE. It was my first actual full lesson I ever taught. And it was on a concept called price elasticity of demand.
Okay.
Which is a really actually hard topic.
It sounds tricky.
It is. It's an economics topic.
Yeah.
And my degree was in human resources. And I'm a bit crap at maths.
Right.
And it requires maths. And it's something I never actually learned in my degree or my A level, because the spec has changed since then. So I was there, and it was a horrendous lesson. It was awful. It was the worst lesson I've ever taught, and I don't think I'm ever going to teach a worse lesson than that.
Okay. Well, that's nice knowing that it can only be uphill from there.
It can. And I was crying as I got that feedback. I actually cried. I don't think she noticed. But you know when you're really trying so hard to not cry, and it makes you even more likely to cry?
Yeah.
That was me getting that feedback. But it was just like a few random tears on either side. It wasn't like a big blub.
Yeah.
I think they're the saddest of cries anyway.
Yeah, I think so. The ones that you prevent yourself from having, they're the saddest of cries. I agree.
They are. Yeah. But I taught that lesson this year, and you know what? It went so well.
Brilliant.
And now the kids are bringing that into their answers that aren't on that topic as an evaluation point. And I was reading their mocks the other day, and I was like, Hatch, you've done it. Like, you've actually taught a subject that you really, really struggle with.
Yeah.
And that was also my interview lesson for
Okay.
the job I'm going to next year.
Yeah.
I kind of think they did it on purpose. However, she watched that lesson. She saw that lesson because she was doing the observation for the interview. And when I got the job, I was like, I've done it, I've done it, I've done it. I can teach that topic.
Amazing.
However, I don't teach a course next year with that on, so it's really annoying.
Okay. Well, I'm sure, I'm sure there'll be opportunities to bring in some price elasticity of demand if you really feel like it.
Yeah, I don't think the applied business course or financial studies really need it, but I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah. I've had a similar experience insofar as the lessons that I taught that went very badly, when I had the opportunity to teach them again, they actually went really well. It's something like being so determined not to let that experience repeat itself. You end up planning an amazing lesson, and it works really well. Yeah. And that's, I guess there's another moral to that story there. Like, don't let a bad lesson deter you, like, because it could turn into one of your best lessons. It really could. Let it motivate you, not deter you.
Absolutely. I was having this thought process the other day because I had an observation in December, and I'll be honest, it didn't go great. This is with one of my, I wouldn't say they're a challenging class. I'd just say it's an odd dynamic because I've got one class in year 10 where none of them really know each other.
Mm.
And then I've got the other class, and every single one of them are best mates.
Right.
All 30 of them, that is their friendship group.
Okay.
And it's like, what on earth has happened
in
this? Anyway, my behaviour management was horrendous in that observation. Bear in mind, I hadn't taught GCSE before.
Mm.
And this was 2 months into teaching GCSE, and I was still getting to know the kids.
Mm.
But then I'm having my next observation with them. And I had a learning walk with them the other day. And it was the same person that observed me the first time.
Mm.
And she pulled me out and just said, your behaviour management in that class is amazing.
Oh, great.
And I was like, what on earth is going on?
That's lovely.
But yeah, honestly, it become from one thing where it's like your biggest weakness, it'll end up becoming your biggest strength because it's the thing you put the most effort into.
Yeah. I mean, I on the topic of behaviour management, I had a formal observation where it's with my very challenging year 7 class, and my head of department acknowledges them as one of the most challenging classes in the school.
Wow.
There's a year 7. There's a real range of abilities that presents its own challenge, but also about 3 or 4 characters. And I learned pretty quickly that in education, that's code for students who misbehave sometimes.
It can be.
Yeah, and there are some big characters in that room, and in this, I had a formal observation with my professional practice tutor from university, and I got feedback from her afterwards. It was an okay lesson on the whole. I think it didn't help that there was an awful smell in the classroom. Like, it smelled like someone had puked in there. Like, when I first entered the classroom before the kids, it hit me like a brick wall, and I spent like a couple of minutes trying to find the source of the smell, but couldn't find it. So I thought, we're going to have to live with this. And my mentor, bless him, said that he'd go get some air freshener, but showed up only with like a little bottle of someone's perfume. I have no clue where he got it. And
he's probably gone to the office and goes,
yeah,
anyone have any perfume?
Got in someone's purse or something.
Yeah.
And he sprayed it around the classroom, and it just kind of congealed into this horrible, sickly sweet smell, which I don't think was an improvement.
No.
But so that was a tricky class. I found out the next week actually that it was one of the kids. They had a spray, like a smell spray that they were spraying. Yeah, so that was a nice bit of resolution, because I was really concerned as to the source of that smell. Like, at least I found out what it was. But anyway, going back to the behaviour point, my tutor told me afterwards that she thought this student, that student, and the other student, they should have all been on sanctions. They should have all got at least C1s, if not C2s. Yeah. And I kind of did agree, and I could understand why an outside observer would think that. But then I said to her, well, these 2 kids in particular, had I given them a sanction at that point, it would have really threatened to derail the whole lesson, because they don't take sanctions lying down. They would argue. they're great arguers. Like really, you can tell the intelligence of some kids really comes through when they're arguing against a sanction. It's incredible,
doesn't it?
Yeah. So they would have really argued, and that could have threatened to undermine the lesson. But she was actually really impressed with that. She thought that showed that I do have a slightly deeper knowledge of the students, and I was prioritizing learning over just sticking to the sanctioning policy. So yeah, that was another battle that I managed to almost not pick, and it helped improve that lesson, I think. And that was something that I only managed to do because I do know the kids, which is nice.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like, you need to know them. I had a similar situation where I had an observation, and there's these two girls in one of my classes, and they are like inseparable. You cannot see one without the other. Except next week where one's on work experience, one's not. I'm so confused about that.
Bless.
I know. But one of them was going through a really difficult time. And I just thought, you know what? Because she asks every lesson, oh, can I sit next to her? It's like, no, you can't. Why would you sit next to her? That is not the seating plan. But I did let her for that week because I knew something was going on. I was like, do you know what? I just need you in my lesson. If you are in my lesson, I know you are safe. I know that, you know, I can look after you here, and you are somewhat engaged in the learning. If you take one thing away from this lesson, I have done a good job with you right now. And I was asked, because I had a learning walk, and they can check the seating plan. And he said, why on earth are those two sat together? It's not on the seating plan. It's not a good idea. Everyone in the school knows it's not a good idea to put those two together. And I said, right, this is the context of what's going on right now, that I can tell you about. And she just turned around and went, do you know what? Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Maybe don't keep it going until after this has resolved itself. But for right now, fair enough.
Yeah, that context is crucial. It really is. And it just takes time to understand.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think we already touched on what I'd probably consider to be the greatest challenge I faced throughout the PGCE, and that is just learning how to pick my battles, like how to prioritize one thing over another. What would you say the greatest challenge you faced and overcame during your PGCE was? Something similar or something different?
Well, I trained during COVID.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah. So what happened was the way my PGCE ran, it doesn't run the same way that yours does.
Yeah.
So I was in one school throughout the entire time.
Yeah.
I never went to the university. It was always done on site. Okay. It's kind of like a skit.
Yeah, okay.
But it was called PGCE. So September and October, we were in classes, but we weren't doing anything. And then, like, towards the end of October, we could start running things, like running starters and running plenaries and small activities. Then in November, we could really start doing things ourselves. But I only really started teaching full lessons in December.
Okay. And was this all being done remotely at this time?
No, this was all in class.
Okay, so the kids were back at this point, yeah.
Half of the kids were back. So we did a rotation system where we had a blue stream and a green stream.
Oh, wow,
so when blue stream were in, green stream were remote, and then it swapped over the next week. And then I had loads of lessons planned for January. I was taking on a different class as well. So I was getting really excited. Then Boris, with his hair, comes on the TV.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we're going into lockdown. Everything's shut. This is the day before we're due to go back.
Okay.
So I get a text off my mentor saying, so we're going to cancel lessons tomorrow and work out what on earth is going on.
Yeah.
So from January to March, I had to deliver all my classes completely remotely.
Right.
Which was a time. So this was the first time my classes were actually meeting each other online. I took on my upper sixth class at this point, and I was like, hi, because we used first names, like, hi, I'm Hattie. You've kind of seen me around in December, but now I'm going to teach you online.
Okay.
My personal favourite part of all that point was having an observation and a fire drill going off in my building. Another favourite was when one of the students went, Hattie, your bedroom doesn't look like that. Are you in the kitchen now? It's the fact that they knew what my house looked like.
Yeah, that's a bit unnerving.
I know, and because I was in a bubble, so I lived alone during my PhD, but because I was in a bubble with my family,
Hmm.
I had to go to my family's house one day when my Wi-Fi went off to teach, and one of the kids, because my brother walked past, and my brother was in the lower sixth,
Okay.
so he was friends with the kids in my class. And they walked past, they're like, "Oh my God, it's George! Oh my God, Hattie, you in George's kitchen? How do you know George?"
A little
Like,
cameo from George.
I was like, we've got the same surname and we look the double of each other. Have you
Okay.
not worked out that we're siblings? And he follows me on Instagram. I'm not in a relationship with him,
Yeah.
my brother. It's like, how have you not worked this out? Um, so I think that was the most challenging part, because my first time teaching a class that were in front of me, that was a full class, was in March, and my
Mm.
PhD finished in May.
Mm.
So I walked into my school, my new school, in a completely different setting to what I trained in September, only really having 2 months teaching experience.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah, which is probably why I cried for my first two observations,
Yeah.
because I had no idea really what I was doing.
Yeah. And was that I'd imagine that was weighing on your mind whilst you were doing the PGCE as well. I'd imagine you were thinking, this isn't giving me the preparation that I'm going to need to really hit the ground running next year. Was that a worry for you in terms of like experience in the classroom and workload and things like that? Was
Do you
that
know what? No,
okay?
because at the time everyone was like, "Oh, you're doing so well, you're doing so well,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
doing great." So I wasn't sat there thinking next year is going to be really difficult,
Okay. Interesting.
because I didn't realize how much of a different setting college is to secondary school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I sat there thinking, you know what, it's going to be fine, because no one warned you about the jump between your PGC and your first year. It
Yeah.
is a massive, massive jump.
My mentor's warned me. He has
Yeah,
warned me. Yeah.
like you're suddenly on an almost full timetable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to do all your planning yourself. Um, Now most schools do have like resources that you use and stuff. I didn't, because I was going into a department where that department only existed for 1 year before I went there. So there was no year 11 resources and no year 13 resources, because they didn't exist, because the school had never had them before, for our subjects. So
God,
I,
that's a nightmare.
yeah, you've suddenly got your own phone. Nobody's watching you all the time.
Hmm.
So you can have those lessons that go really badly and no one will ever know about it. It's fantastic. Um, no, I'm joking. You do have to reflect and like make sure that that doesn't happen
It's
again.
that little voice in the back of my head that'll know about it, and
Yeah,
yeah, he won't let me sleep at night if I
yeah.
if I
And the
don't teach
kids
good
will know
lessons.
about it too.
Yeah,
Especially when your head of department turns up and right, I'm going to do a pupil voice survey. Can I
oh
borrow you,
wow,
you, and you? And it's the three kids that like will be completely honest.
yeah,
Luckily, that turned out really well.
nice,
But um, there is that, and you've got extra responsibilities now, like break duty and the club that you have to run, most likely. Um, the fact that you are responsible for 30 mini people's pastoral side as well, as a form tutor. And it does become a lot. However, it is terrifying for the first few months.
yeah,
After that, you do really find your feet. And
yeah,
there is more support in a school than you think there is.
yeah, yeah. I think
Just got to
that's
make sure you know where it is.
yeah, that has to be crucial too. Like asking for help is so important. Like if
Yeah.
you're I think that was something I should have done earlier in my PGCE, because I was trying to figure it all out myself. And I'd have saved so much time, so much effort, so much stress if I'd have just reached out. So yeah, I think having that community of support around you and really using it is so important to staying sane.
Yeah. Or just like for your year group that you're attached to, there's a whole team of you. You're not the only like year seven form tutor, for example. There's other people. You've got your head of year. Most people have a deputy head of year. Then you've got like an SEN department who can help you support your students with additional needs. most schools will have things like a senior member for vulnerable students, like PPG students or students with a lot going on at home. There'll be a member of staff in charge of teaching strategies. So there's loads and loads of people, and most teachers, ECT's probably not, but most teachers are more than happy to let you just walk into a lesson and observe you. See, when I hear the word observation, I cry. When more experienced teachers hear the word observation, they're like, yeah, come in.
Yeah. I mean, it's great in my school that we have a this culture where teachers are just in and out of each other's classrooms all the time. So
it's the same at mine. I still cry though.
Yeah, I mean, it is still scary. I mean, it's my school is almost laid out in a funny way that you have to move through classrooms to get to other classrooms.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, people are always just walking through other people's classrooms, and it's just very much an accepted part of the culture. But still, if the headmaster ever walks into my classroom, I do have a little panic for a second. Even if he's just walking through to get to another classroom, I immediately start second guessing myself.
Yeah, it's the same with us. So we have an open door policy. The only reason you can really close your door is if they're doing an exam or you're doing something really loud.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But our maths department and our science department, you have to walk through their classrooms to get anywhere in the school.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, my class were doing an exam and the deputy head teacher just walked in and sat down and I went, you're not going to see anything. They're doing an exam. And he went, oh, right, okay. So he came into my next lesson instead.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of schools do have that now, and it is good. And our school even films.
Really?
Well, you have to give consent for it.
Yeah.
But we've got something called On View.
Okay.
Where you can have a camera installed in your classroom, and nobody watches it except you.
Okay.
So if I don't have it because I cry when I get filmed, it's why I do podcasts, not video.
Okay. Yeah.
But you can have a camera installed into your classroom. I don't think a lot of schools are moving towards this. And this is purely for you to look back on your own lessons and reflect.
Okay, that's interesting.
But if you wanted to, you could let other people see it too.
Yeah. I think I quite like that, actually. I think I'd like to be able to watch myself teach.
See, I would. I thought I would. And then I did my filmed micro teach for my PGCE.
Yeah.
And I couldn't watch it back, and I had to be forced to watch it by my mentor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I hate the idea of being filmed.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you do drama and performances and things like that. You don't
stage.
On stage, which isn't filmed, I take it.
It's not filmed.
Okay. You don't want there to be a record.
No.
Of the performance.
No.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that when I first started making podcasts and I listened to them back when I was doing the audio editing, I hated it. I hated listening to my own voice. And the first time I heard myself, I was like, is that how I sound? It's an embarrassment. But yeah, gradually I think I got used to it. And I may have actually even improved the way I talk just from listening back to myself on podcasts. I wouldn't be surprised if that's happened. So yeah, I think for me, I think it'd be quite helpful actually to see myself teaching. I think I'd be mortified to begin with, but I think I might be able to actually work with that. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'll have to ask around at my school to see if there's any movement in that direction towards, what was it called? OnView?
Yeah, it's ONVU.
ONVU. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make a note of that one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. It is really good. The people that do it take a lot of pride in it.
Yeah.
It could never be me.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair. So there's one other question that I really wanted to ask you.
What?
So my podcast has a focus on mental health.
Yeah, I was about to bring this up with you, actually.
Say again?
I was about to bring this up with you.
Ah, cool. Yeah. So it's something that's really important to me because I've had some pretty significant struggles in the past with mental health problems at both ends of the spectrum, as I characterize it. So anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And it kind of runs in my family a little bit as well. And I was aware going into the PGCE that it was, well, several people had told me that it was a course that will break you. Okay. Just in terms of sheer amount of stress, sheer amount of things you need to do. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds encouraging. And given that I do have some anxiety issues, I thought this could be an issue. But I thought that So this was another reason for me starting the podcast. I thought that it'd be good to reflect on my mental health as I went along, almost as a form of catharsis to help me process my thoughts and feelings. And it has been helpful in that regard. But on the whole, I'd actually say that despite all of the stress of the PGCE, my mental health has never been better. And I think that's because I've never had such a strong sense of purpose.
Yes.
So all of the stress makes sense. It is for something. I'm stressed because I'm trying to educate children, and I can't think of anything more important. There's nothing else out there that would be more worth being stressed about, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So that I'd say that's the overall effect on my mental health. That's the overall effect that the PGCE has had on my mental health. So I wanted to ask you what you think the experience on the PGCE did for your mental health, if anything at all.
Yeah, so I'm the same pretty much. I've had growing up had loads and loads of mental health issues. Like, this is no secret, like in and out of cams and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
But I'd agree. Lockdown aside, because I think that definitely had some impact on my mental health. I don't think that was to do with the PGC either. I think that was the fact that I was locked in my house for 3 months.
Yeah. That'll do it. That'll do it for anyone.
It really does. But I felt pretty solid during my PGCE. I had so much support around me. Like, I could never ever thank the team that I had around me more. My personal tutor was incredible, and I remember her saying to me, "Do you know what? You wear your heart on your sleeve. I know when you're stressed. I know when you're about to break. However, you have never once let that affect your professionalism. You do that in a closed room where you know there's somebody there to help you, away from the kids. But the minute you get into that classroom, you're a different person." And I was actually thinking about this yesterday, because I went into work and I was so jittery.
Okay.
I was so jittery. I've not felt panic or anxiety like that in a very long time.
Okay.
And there was no reason for it. I was just very, very anxious.
Yeah.
But the minute my phone came in, I was fine.
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because I sat there and I thought, "Do you know what? This is probably not the healthiest way to deal with anything ever." But I was like, these kids need me.
Yeah.
They might not know they need me.
Yeah.
But they need me.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise, who's going to tell them where their maths class is today?
Yeah.
Who's going to tell them about the house table tennis competition after school?
Yeah.
Like, it's the tiny little things that they need to know. And then I had my year 12 straight after, and I only had 5 of them because they were on work experience. But they came in, and I've got this one kid in that class, and he will walk in, and he'll make a joke every single time he walks in. I was like, "You're all right, miss. You're all right, miss. Miss, can we make a TikTok together today?" No, we are not making a TikTok together. Please stop threatening to put me on your TikTok. But it's that sense of, do you know what? For 30 seconds, I could make that child smile.
Yeah.
And it is one of the probably worst careers to go into if you've got loads of anxiety, but it's also one of the best careers to go into if you've got loads of anxiety.
Yeah, I think it can, if you really buy into the value of education, then it kind of frames your anxiety and makes it purposeful. So I think that's what it did for me. PGCE courses, and especially actually the maths subject this year for my particular course, they have quite a high attrition rate anyway. A lot of students do drop out, and I think I don't want to overcharacterize. I don't want to overgeneralize here, but I know for at least some of them, I don't think they valued education as highly, which is fine. It's fine.
Not for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we all value different things.
Yeah.
So I think for them, the stress almost wasn't worth it. So I think if you really value education, then the sense of purpose that learning to teach and teaching can give you will protect you against that anxiety. Well, not protect you against the anxiety, but it will make it worth it. It will make the stress worth it, which I think that's been my experience anyway. And it sounds like it's been your experience too. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah, I don't think it's the career to go into if you don't value education. If it's a vocation.
Exactly, because the few people I was thinking of on the maths course, particularly, if you study to be a maths teacher, there's a really big bursary involved. So the few people I'm thinking of, I know for a fact because they told me they were primarily interested in the bursary, and wanting to get a big bursary isn't a good enough reason to start a PGCE, because that won't sustain you through the stress. I don't think any amount. I don't think any amount of money. I don't think any amount of money will sustain you through the stress. You have to have a higher calling than that.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
like what you get paid as a bursary, you are not going to get that in your first year.
yeah, that's
You're
right.
not going to get that in your first 5 years of teaching,
Yeah,
unless you teach in London.
that's right. Which has its own stresses.
It does. Trust me, I teach in London.
Right, there you go.
But like, it is not a job you go into like thinking you're gonna go into work at 9 and leave
Yeah,
at 3.
yeah,
Like, I get into work at 7
yeah,
and I leave most days at 5,
yeah,
and then when I get home I'm still doing work.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying don't have a work-life balance, because you need that. And I do have an absolute cut-off point, and I refuse to work at the weekend unless
Excellent.
it's absolutely urgent.
Yeah,
However, I do so much overtime and I work so much for 30 grand a year.
yeah,
And the only reason I get 30 grand is because I work at an academy and I work in London.
yeah, yeah,
However, I do believe it is still the best career in the world.
yeah, yeah,
But if you do not love teaching, and if you are not passionate about helping young people, and especially in secondary, if you do not love your subject,
yeah,
it is not worth it.
yeah. Exactly. I mean, I think for some people starting the PGCE, and you know what, this was probably me. They might value teaching, value education, but the real love of it comes with more experience. So I'd say that I always valued education, but I fell in love with it during my PGCE. It could have gone the other way. I could have ended up, I'm sure if I had a whole load of negative experiences, I could have ended up really not liking it. And then I'd have struggled. But yeah, I think you have to have the right sort of motivation to begin with. You have to be getting into it because you value education, and then you're far more likely to succeed. I mean, I think that's the same with kids in the classroom as well. Like, if they're only motivated because they either want to get a reward or because they're afraid of getting sanctioned, they're not going to engage with the work as much. Whereas if they're genuinely interested in the work and really value it, they're going to fly.
Yeah. And I think that comes with how you teach it as well.
Yeah.
Because I know, especially my subject, because my subject's an option. So it's not compulsory at all.
Yeah.
But I've got kids that have taken business because their parents have told them it's good for them.
Right. Okay.
Subject you can apply to anything if you don't know what you want to do.
Yeah.
However, you've got to, as a teacher, it's my responsibility to make them love my subject.
Yeah.
And that's actually something I'm running a CPD session on for my school this week.
Nice.
And I knew I'd done that because the year 11s left this week. And one of my students came up to me and said, "Do you know what, miss? I hated business because my parents told me I had to take it.
Yeah.
You've made me like business, and now I'm doing a business A level."
Yeah.
And that was the same for me.
That's such a success story. Well done.
I know. I cried when she told me, and everyone was looking at me like, "Why is she crying?" But it was the same for me. I took business because I did not know what I wanted to do. Well, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I wanted to be a drama teacher. So I took drama as an A level, and then I took psychology as an A level because I thought it'd help in the teaching side of things.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, what other subject do I take?
Yeah.
Because I've got to do 3. Well, I actually had to do 4, so I did an EPQ as well.
Okay.
But I was just thinking, I'm just going to take business just in case I need it. But now I'm a business teacher.
Amazing.
And that was because of my first year of business. I hated it.
Yeah.
I was ready to drop it because I could have dropped it if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I just stuck with it because I was like, I might as well just do it. I've done a year of it now.
Yeah.
But then my business teacher, my second year, made me fall in love with the subject. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have carried on with that. I definitely wouldn't have got an A star. but it was because of Nicole that I'm now a business teacher. So it is also, I think, and I absolutely agree with you, if the kids don't enjoy the subjects and then don't want to be in your classroom, they're not going to fly. But also that's definitely on the teacher.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my advice is always to pick subjects. So whether it's at A level or when you're thinking about a course at university, pick the subjects that you are most interested in. Like, study what you're interested in. Don't worry about the career that it may or may not lead to, because I mean, you can fail in life doing what you hang on, what was this quote? It was something that I heard Jim Carrey say once. He said, you can fail in life doing what you don't want to do. So you might as well fail in life. If you're going to fail, you might as well fail in life doing what you do want to do. Yeah. So like picking a subject because you think it's going to lead to a great career, like don't bank on that, you know. So you might as well choose what you're legitimately interested in. And then you develop a habit, you start picking things, I think, for the right reasons. But the teachers are so important, because what subjects are the students interested in? Well, it's the subjects where they've had really good teachers. You know, I think that's really true.
It is. And at the end of the day, this is a bit morbid, sorry.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're all going to end up in the same place.
That's right.
No one's going to care how much money you had or what job you did. What people are going to remember is, you know what, they had a great life. They were happy. They enjoyed themselves.
Yeah.
And they made the people around them happy. No one's going to care about, oh, well, do you know what, they got a promotion and they had this car. Like, it's not about that.
No, I 100% agree. And I think that's a really nice place to start.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
What do you think? Yeah.
No, 100%. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Miss Ruddick. I thought this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I hope that we can maybe check in with each other on the podcasts every so often. Like, that'd be really nice.
Yeah, I think that would be a great plan, actually. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm really, really grateful for your time. If you like the episode, please spread the word in person and on social media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter @mypgcepod or email mypgcepod@gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate and review in your directory of choice. Please also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/mypgcepod and helping fund both the podcast and my PGCE course. Thank you, and talk again soon.